Okay, so I am now going to show you some code optimization tips or techniques on how are we going to make our applications more efficient, and also the files would be then more manageable. Okay, so actually there are a lot of techniques that we could implement into our codes, but I'm just going to have the basic ones as of this moment. Okay, so first is as you could see here in our URL, so we have shown or we have passed our ID. Okay, so the purpose of the user ID here is to actually retrieve or to filter the contacts that our app is going to retrieve. For example, in this case, the user ID of Pitok, the one who log in, is 1. Okay? So as you can see here, only uh, the contacts of Pitok has been retrieved and displayed. So, but then in the URL, you could see here our user ID. Now, if ever the user is going to change this one, okay, and enter, okay, so it is going to refresh our records, and as you can see, still we have Pitok, but then these are actually the contacts of Kulas. Okay, why? It is because we have changed the user ID, and our code follows whatever is written into our URL. Those are the records that are going to be retrieved from the database. Okay, so what are we going to do here is we are going to hide our user ID. Okay, actually, if you want, you could also hide the full name. Okay, so from our login, this is how we passed our parameters. Okay, so we have created a params object here. Then we have included the full name and user ID. That is why we could see here the full name and the user ID with their corresponding values. Okay, but instead that we are going to have, okay, I'm just going to hide the user ID. Okay, so I'm going to comment this out. Then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to use the session storage. Okay, a session storage, I guess we have already this one in our previous topics. Okay, um, these are the variables. Okay, set item, then I'm going to have the user, still the user ID, and the value, maybe there. Okay, a session, by the way, is going to be created when we are going to connect to a server. Okay, and once the browser is going to close, okay, all session or all variables related to that session created by a session storage command here will also be deleted. Okay, so these variables are going to be active only if ever or when the session is open, and when it is going to close, all of these variables will be deleted. Okay, so now I'm going to save this one here. Now I'm going back to the login page. Oops. Okay, and as I'm going to click on the login, oh, pdog 12345. Okay, so as you can see, we have no user ID anymore into our URL. Okay, so we have hidden our um, user ID. Okay, but as you can see, we don't have uh, the contacts for Pitok Batulata. Why? It is because we have not yet edited our main page. Okay, so we have here our previous code. Okay, so still that is why we don't have any items or any records into our table here. It is because the value of user ID is actually undefined or null. Why? It is because it's still getting the value from the search parameters, in which the search parameters is actually coming from the URL. Okay? So instead that we are going to have the search parameters, we are going to have the session storage that user ID. Okay? Take note that we have defined or set the user ID from our login page. Okay, so we have the user ID here. So to get the value of this variable, we are going to use still the object session storage that the name of the variable. Okay, save. Okay, so if we could just have the refresh. Okay, so you could see here now are the contacts for Pitok Batulata. Okay, so in your case, you are going to try later on, you are going to hide also your full name. Okay, so that's our tip number one. So for our tip number two is, as you can see here, we have the URL for get contacts. Then we have another URL for the get groups and so on. Okay, so every time that we are going to call our API, we are going to specify the complete URL. Okay, so but as you could have seen, it's fine. Okay, there was no problem when we were running our code. But okay, first of all, we are calling it from this location here. Okay, so what will happen if ever we are going to transfer or change the location of our API endpoints? Okay, so what will happen then is, therefore, we are also going to change each of these URL definitions. Okay, so we have that, then get contact details, so we are going to change that one also. So if ever there are 100 URLs, okay, into our code, so you are going to change also the main URL for each of those 100 items. Okay, and the change of URL usually is going to happen when we are going to deploy our code or our application. So for example, I'm going to deploy it in GoDaddy or whatever host or Vercel or whatever hosting location. Okay, so therefore you are going to change all of these. Okay, so that is why we must have to have a we must have to define only this one here once, then so that if ever there will be some changes onto our API endpoint location or URL, then we are going to change that one definition only, and we are going to define that here into our what's this, into our login. This is, by the way, our login. Okay, so how are we going to change, or how are we going to define our URL location? Okay, so actually I have tested it here, so that is why you can see here into my use effect, I have created here another session storage named main URL, and in my main URL I have defined my main or API location here, and it's located at localhost/contacts-API. Okay, so now I have defined it in use effect, or I could also define it here on top. Actually, I could also define it here. Okay, so I'm just going to follow what I have here now. So I have defined, take note, my local host or my location here into my use effect. Anyway, you could define anywhere uh, your session storage. Your session storage variable it is because anywhere then of your application, this is accessible. Okay? So, now, as you can see here, how are we going then to implement our main this URL that we have defined into our use effect? So the first one way to do it is just actually get the value of the main URL. Okay. Now I want you to take note that I have defined my main URL. At the end is I have the slash, the forward slash. So therefore, there's no need for me now to have the forward slash here. By the way, the original of this is const URL is equal to localhost slash contacts dash API slash users dot php. This was the original. Okay? But since I have already defined my main URL here, okay, into my session storage, so instead that I'm going to have the complete URL, so I just have now my session storage. By the way, this is backticked. Okay? It is back. I think it is the key before 1. Okay? So this is our back tick. Okay? So we could then I forgot the term for this. String interpolation, I think. Okay? So I have defined here. So by the way, another one is so that you can fully understand this one is const URL is equal to session storage that main URL, then concatenate it with users.php. Okay, this is another way on how are you going to define our URL using our session storage by using now our concatenator. Okay, but then for me, I would rather use this one because by the way, this newer compared with the concatenator that we are used. Okay, string interpolation, then just concatenate or just write beside our this one here. Okay, without our concatenator. Okay, the result of these two are actually the same. Okay, so again, I am using here string interpolation. Okay, but then you must have to use the backtick. Okay, so all of these, the 3 lines here are just actually they have the same output, which is this one here. Okay, so this one way on how are we going to use our session storage. Then here, okay, so I could still have, okay, I'm going to have the backticked, then still I'm going to interpolate session storage that main URL. Okay, this would be fine. We have no problem with this. Okay, but what I want you to take note is every time that we are going to use the main URL, we are calling on the session storage. Okay, and there would be a better way on how are we going to do that. Okay, so I'm going to define here. Okay, I'm just going to have it here. I'm going to define a variable main URL is equal to session storage dot main URL. Okay, so that instead that I'm going to call, or I'm going to use the object session storage every time I'm going to have uh, my API call. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to have, okay, backtick, then I'm just going to use then my main URL. So this is more efficient. It is because we are just using here a simple variable and it is not an object. Okay, so I'm just going to copy here, then I'm going to change each occurrence of the URL. Oops, backticked. Okay, we also have update contact. Delete. Search. Okay, I think that's all. So save. Okay, so there, as you can see, there are no changes on our application, but actually we are now we have now avoided the problem that when we are going to change the location of our API, we are going to change a lot of, by the way, we still have the add contact, I think. Okay, so I think we have only two. Okay, so I'm going to define here const main URL then change okay, and also with our register. So every occurrence of or every time that we are going to call our API, so you must have to change it to with the session storage. Okay, so there will be more in the next video that we're going to have. I'll be introducing another optimization tip. So, and in this video, we have only the URL. What's the other one? Okay, both on the URL actually. The URL by changing our search params there, and also with the URL location of our API. Okay, so that's all for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.